The following lesson is linked to Learning Outcome 2, Reading and Viewing, and addresses the assessment standards that requires learners to explore and explain key features of texts and how they contribute to meaning in poetry. Learners should be able to recognize that verse and stanza forms, rhyme, rhythm, and punctuation affect meaning. Hi, in this lesson we're going to continue looking at poetry, especially how rhythm works in poetry. In the last lesson, we were asked an important question: what makes poetry? We looked at what a poem is and what rhyme is, and how it functions as a tool used by poets to communicate with us, the readers. In this lesson, we're going to focus on rhythm, one of the most important aspects of poetry. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to define rhythm and discuss how the meaning of a poem is affected by the rhythm of the lines. What exactly do we mean by rhythm? If we could see what rhythm sounds like, it might look like this: a wave-like pattern. What is rhythm? Let's hear how some of the poets define it.
Rhythm in poetry, I would define as the flow, or the speed of the flow.
It's about the color, the flavor, the texture of words. It's about the values that you're trying to impart. It's about the sounds that the words make. It is about rhythm. It's about the musicality of the words as much as it is about their meaning.
A rhythm for me is the music in the poem. As percussionists, we get the rhythm from the first stanza that the poet utters.
A rhythm is a flow of words and verses and stanzas, from the feelings of the writer.
Rhythm is the harmony produced by the regular repetition of a beat or accent. There is the beat and the time between beats, and this is repeated again and again. But we can also have more complicated rhythms that have one beat and that is stronger than the others to make the pattern of the rhythm. More complex rhythm with accented beat and lesser unaccented beat. It's easy to find the beat in music because it is the beat that guides you when you dance. It is the beat that makes you want to get up and dance or lie down and relax. But what about poetry? There are no drums or instruments in poetry, only words. So, where does the beat come from? The beat comes from the words, and to see how this works, we need to go back to our last lesson where we learned about syllables. A syllable is a word or part of a word that has only one vowel sound. Remember that in the last lesson, we thought about syllables like bricks of sound that build a word, like hos, pe, to, and fo, to, graph. When it comes to understanding rhythm, we need to add another layer to our understanding of syllables. This is it. In a word, there will be only one syllable that has the emphasis or stress placed on it when it is said out loud. This is pretty easy. When there's only one syllable in the word, like dog, horse, cat, and bird. In these cases, we don't need to worry about where the emphasis goes, but when we have two words with two or more syllables, it gets a bit more complicated. Let's look at some examples. Like far, the. Do we say father or father? We say father. When we look at words, we need to say which syllable are stressed and which are unstressed. In other words, where do we put the emphasis in a word? An accent refers to the stress or emphasis placed on a particular syllable or syllables in a line of poetry. We can show the rhythm the stress or the accent or the line by using a pattern or straight lines and slash lines above the syllables like this. Let's put the stresses on the word we've already looked at, father. The first syllable is stressed and we show it like this. The last syllable is unstressed, therefore we show it like this. Let's look at the words we had in our last lessons. Yellow, the first syllable is stressed and we show it like this. And the last syllable is unstressed, therefore we show it like this. Orange, the first syllable is stressed and we show it like this, with the last syllable unstressed. Purple, the first syllable is stressed and we show it like this, with this last syllable unstressed. Hospital, this word has 3 syllables where the first syllable is stressed and we mark the other 2 like this. This makes it seem as if every word in English starts with a stressed syllable. That isn't always true. Look at these words and say which syllable are stressed and which are unstressed. Let's look at the word reward. We've got re as unstressed and ward as stressed. We've got great as stressed and fully is unstressed. If you're uncertain about the stress of a word, say the word out loud, stressing the different syllables and tap out the rhythm with your finger. Now, try and work out where the stress is placed in these 3 words. Photo, photograph, and photographer. The answers are, for photo, pho is stressed and to is unstressed. When it comes to photograph, pho is stressed, to unstressed, and graph also unstressed. But when it comes to photographer, pho is unstressed, tog is stressed, ra unstressed, fa also unstressed. So, what does this all mean for rhythm in poetry? Rhythm is the flow of the words, looking at which syllables are stressed and which syllables are unstressed. Rhythm refers to where the stresses fall in a line of poetry. Let's go back to our original definition to see how our understanding of rhythm is growing. Rhythm is the harmony produced by the regular repetition of a beat or accent. So, let's check. For rhythm, we need a regular beat, single, repeated, and regular drum beat. And within that beat, there will be a regular pattern of emphasized or stressed accents. More complicated beat with stressed or accented beats in a regular rhythm, and altogether they will produce a harmony or a pattern. But what about rhyme in all this? If 2 words have a very similar sound, we say that they rhyme. Does poetry have to have rhyme to make it a poem? No. Some poems have rhyme, some poems don't. What every poem should have is rhythm, some kind of beat. Why have we spent so much time looking at rhythm? Because the rhythm of the lines should add to and support the meaning of the lines. Let's look at an example to see how this happens. We'll be looking at the first 2 verses of a poem by Zwelithemba Twalo called No Water, No Life. Listen to this poem first. Don't worry about the meaning yet. Just close your eyes and listen to the rhythm of the words.
Without water, there is no life. Without water, there is strife. Without water, there is no education. Without water, there is starvation. Without water, there is no health. Without water, there is death. The fact of the matter, the battle is getting hotter. In the gutter, without glitter, the squatter cannot live without water. I utter this chatter to the operator of the computer. One Mr. Hater ends a traitor who get fatter and flatter. You better scatter. Just yesterday, you said later would be greater. But people are bitter. Nothing is getting better without water.
First of all, According to our definition of rhythm, we should hear a repeated and regular beat. Do we have that in this poem? Yes. In the first verse, it is created by the repetition of the phrase, without water, there is no life. Where the stress in the lines is placed on the last word of the sentence because it is different. The fact that there is a rhyming scheme here adds to the rhythm, but it is possible to have rhythm without rhyme. In the second verse, the rhythm is created by the repeated stress falling on the word. Let's look at where the stress falls in this verse. In most lines, there are two stressed words: education and starvation. This has the effect of making the poem sound like it is getting faster. In other words, the rhythm increases. If we think back to the drums at the beginning of the lesson, we can see that the rhythms played earlier sound similar. The first verse has the regular single beat of the accented word, while the second verse shares the rhythm of the faster drumming that has more than one type of beat. Now we need to ask ourselves how this rhythm affects the meaning of the poem. In other words, what is the poet trying to say to us through the combination of words and rhythms? What emotions is he communicating through the rhythm? Doesn't it sound like someone slowly getting angrier and angrier until he's almost shouting? And the words would suggest that this is true. The poet is using poetry as a way to bring attention to something that is bothering him and that makes him upset. In this case, that so many people in South Africa don't have access to water. But there is another aspect to rhythm in this poem that is quite clever. Listen to it again and think about what the sounds remind you of.
Without water, there is no life. Without water, there is strife. Without water, there is no education. Without water, there is starvation. Without water, there is no health. Without water, there is death. The fact of the matter, the battle is getting hotter. In the gutter, without glitter, the squatter cannot live without water. I utter this chatter to the operator of the computer. One Mr. Hater ends a traitor who get fatter and flatter. You better scatter. Just yesterday, you said later would be greater. But people are bitter. Nothing is getting better without water.
The short sentences and the rhythm made me think of water trickling and flowing faster and faster, which is quite appropriate because of the topic of the poem. It's time for today's task. Listen carefully to the following stanza taken from Mushile Wantodi's poem, South African Dialogue.
South African Dialogue. Morning, Bus. Bus claim Bus says I must come and tell Bus that. Bus Ben's Bus boy says Bus Ben want to see Bus claim Bus. If Bus don't use Bus claim Bus.
Describe the rhythm of the stanza and explain how the rhythm contributes to the meaning of the poem. In our next lesson, we'll be looking at how another technique of writing, punctuation, affects meaning in poetry. From me, Nkele Mutsumi, it's goodbye.